Sorry, I remembered to record it this time, which was lucky. Hello, everyone. So welcome to the Friday Night Live on a Thursday. I'm on holiday tomorrow, so I won't be around tomorrow evening to do the live, and I'm away for a week, so there won't be one next Friday either. But I'm back on the 7th, so I can't remember what day that takes us to, 12th or something will be the Friday. So I'll go back to the lives then on a Friday evening, because I think that generally works fairly well for everyone. So the questions, the first one isn't particularly good because I haven't got an answer to it, but I'll read it out anyway and just explain. The question is, I have OCD and find I get confused with that and obsessive thinking towards drinking. So I don't really know much about OCD. I mean, I know very vaguely what it is, but I don't really know how it interacts with drinking. I mean, I could hazard a guess. But I don't think it might not be a particularly good one. I don't know if anyone else has OCD and can comment in the comments section, either on this post or the other post. But as I say, sorry, I can't give a huge amount of input on that. The next one says, not really a question, but a comment. I've noticed recently lots of posts are appearing from people who have clearly not read the book or looked at the website and are then giving advice to newcomers that is the exact opposite of your amazing book. I know they mean well, but I think people are then unnecessarily struggling as they are being told they have a disease, etc., etc. What are your thoughts? It is difficult because obviously it is an Alcohol Explained Facebook group for people who you don't necessarily have to have read the book. But I think it is useful if people have at least gone on the website so they have an idea of the approach. So it is a bit frustrating. I have, as you know, introduced questions. So before you join the group, you have to positively state that you've either read one or either of the books, or that you will at least go on the website and have a look at the resources on there. But I think the problem is people just tick that and say they will and they don't do it. And it is fairly obvious when there are posts there. I don't really want to, as I say, I'm not particularly comfortable throwing people out just because I haven't read the book, because I kind of saw this as a community for lots of different people. And there are people who have taken a lot of different approaches. There's, people who have gone through AA but used the book, sort of a mixed and match approach. There's people that, I mean, very few people have only read Alcohol Explained. Most people have read a mix of different quit lit or different approaches. So it's difficult, really. I can't, other than asking people about the question before they join, there's not much else I can do. But all I can say is if that does happen, please do jump in to people and recommend what you believe to be the correct advice. And don't forget, if there's anything on there that you do think is actively offensive, if you click on the comment and do report to admin, because then I or one of the admin can have a look at it and delete it if necessary. The next one, love all your books, including Diet and Fitness Explained. Thank you. My first question, do you do any coaching, or do you have any proteges who do? I'm interested in both alcohol-free and diet and fitness coaching. So I don't at the moment. In fact, I think we've messaged on this anyway, but a few people have asked me about it. I kind of am thinking about it, but not particularly seriously at the moment. It's just kind of an idea. But if you do want coaching, then Alex and Lisa of the Sober Experiment, and this is, so the website is soberexperiment.co.uk. They have read Alcohol Explained. I'm quite close to them. They contacted me. I was on the podcast. They do coaching. Okay. And because they've read the book and they're familiar with it, you can expect that kind of approach with it. If you also look on their website, under support, there's Sober Dave, and there's a link to Sober Dave's website as well, and he does coaching. He's got quite a few qualifications, so he's someone else you could look at. So they are the 2 or 3 people that I personally know who I would recommend. And then my second question has to do with sleep. I tend to nod off by 9:30 p.m. I usually need 9 hours sleep, and this has me waking up anywhere between 1 and 3 a.m. in the morning when I'm not drinking. Do you recommend trying to keep myself awake until about 11 if I want to wake up at 7? And if so, how do I fight off the heavy rain dampening of my natural brain chemistry? So Yes, I would. I think if you are waking up in the night regularly, that usually suggests that you're going to bed too early. If you need 8 hours sleep, you're in bed for 9 or 10 hours, you will wake up in the middle for a couple of hours. And the problem is that can kind of feed in on itself, because sleep is a habit. And if you're waking up at the same time every day, you will continue to wake up at that time. And it can feed into itself, because if you're frustrated and annoyed that you're waking up, that's going to keep you awake even longer. So what I would say is set an alarm for the same time every day, even at weekends, and experiment with your night, your sleep time. So if you're waking up in the night, incrementally move it backwards and backwards, until you find the right thing. Eventually you will start sleeping through, or you should start sleeping through the night. One other thing I was going to say on that, and I've completely forgotten now. Never mind. I'll probably think of it later and mention it. Oh, yeah, sorry. So if you're really tired, how to stay awake? Just get up and walk around a bit. You will find if you're sitting still, you do get tired towards the end of the day. That's just the natural way of things. So just get up and move around a bit. And I wouldn't go too mad. Like if you're falling asleep at 9:30, don't bother pushing it to 11 on day one. Just sort of maybe push it back half an hour each night, and see how you go. The next question I really like, how soon to tackle other obstacles after going alcohol free? So food, exercise, relationships, smoking, the endless list. I would say whenever you're comfortable with doing it. But what I would say, just bear in mind that when you stop drinking, there's a period where your brain chemistry is getting back to normal. So your brain works by way of homeostasis, which is a chemical balance, and alcohol is a sedative and a depressant. So your brain counters it by becoming overly sensitive, so it can work while under the depressing effects of the alcohol. So when the alcohol wears off, you have a period of being like oversensitized, which is anxiety, that anxiety you get after drinking. And of course, the more you drink, the more oversensitized your brain has to become to function through the sedating effects of the alcohol. And the worse the anxiety is afterwards, and it turns into full-blown depression and the shakes and all the rest of it. And that's what I call the alcohol withdrawal. It's an unpleasant side effect that you get after the initial dose of the drug wears off. Which is why obviously when we start drinking, it's very hard to stop, because the alcohol wears off and you have an unpleasant, insecure feeling, and you need another drink to get rid of it. That's why moderation is so incredibly difficult. It's just easier to quit. So what a lot of people find is, for those first few days when your brain chemistry is off whack, it manifests in different ways for different people, but essentially what it comes down to is you can feel just everything can be a bit overwhelming. You lose your mental resilience. You don't really feel up to anything. And I don't think there's much point trying to take on, tackling a difficult relationship, or quitting smoking, or doing more exercise, or eating more sensibly, whatever it is. So I would say let that sort itself out. Also, what I would say is don't try and take on too much, because a lot of things fall into place naturally. And it's not only brain chemistry, but when your brain chemistry gets back to normal, you then need to get back to sleeping better. And that will have an impact, because until you start to get a lot more sleep under your belt, some more good quality sleep under your belt, you're probably not going to fancy exercising. And if you do it, it's going to be quite hard work. Don't forget as well, with alcohol, it increases your heart rate. So one of the main things with that is it makes you feel very lethargic, because the faster your heart goes, the more your body is telling you to sit down and rest. Okay, so that's why drinkers are quite often quite lethargic. The one thing I would say there is, if you are smoking, I would hit that next after you've quit drinking, because the food and the exercise, again, smoking puts your heart rate up quite high, which makes exercise very difficult. And it also has quite an interesting and complicated relationship with eating, which is probably a bit long for me to go into now and a bit off topic. But smoking makes you overeat, as well as stopping you being able to exercise because of the increased heart rate. So there's a sort of a common sense order way of doing things. And what I would say is tackle the drugs first, like alcohol, nicotine, and if you're drinking lots of coffee and that's something you want to address, then the caffeine as well. But I would definitely say one thing at a time, and just, I mean, some people do everything at once and they do it very well. But certainly I think things do fall into place a bit. And don't forget as well, alcohol produces dopamine, and now people confuse dopamine with endorphins. Endorphins are the things that make you feel good. Dopamine is a motivator. It makes you want to do things. And one of the things it makes you want to do is it makes you want to eat, and eat a lot. It just makes you want to do anything. That's why when people wake up after drinking, they quite often want to eat loads. That's the dopamine. So again, you need a few days. There's no point trying to tackle food when you've still got a load of dopamine in you, because that's going to be making you want to eat loads and loads. So I would say just use your body will tell you, because when you've got rid of the alcohol and your heart rate goes back to normal and you're sleeping better, you will feel like exercising. Most people will feel like exercising. Most healthy people, even up to their 60s, will enjoy a bit of exercise every day. Next one is, I know you talk a lot about sleep in your books. My question is that every time I go alcohol free, I end up getting up for a wee 2 to 3 times a night. When I drink alcohol, it doesn't happen. So I'm guessing because alcohol dehydrated my body. I did the 30-day experiment last October and it happened every night throughout. Does it ever improve? So the dehydration thing, it could be partly to do with that, but there will be another element there. So what happens with your bladder is it fills up and it fills up and it fills up and it gets fuller and fuller and fuller. Okay. If you stop now, hopefully, most people watching this will be wearing clothes. Okay. If you stop and think about it, you can physically feel the clothes on your body. But for most of the day when you're wearing clothes, you're not aware of it. So what it is, you can physically feel it, but because it's there all the time, a physical feeling that's there all the time, you start to become immune to it. It just becomes the background noise to your life, and you just cease being consciously aware of it. So what can happen with your bladder is you can become overly sensitized to it. So if you go to the toilet a lot and you get in the habit of going to the toilet a lot, you get to kind of notice when there's any kind of expansion in your bladder. And what you can do is try and put off going to the toilet. I seem to be going really off topic tonight, bearing in mind we're supposed to be talking about alcohol, but let's start talking about why people wee too much. But if you try and, instead of going to the toilet immediately, you need to try and hold it for as long as you possibly can, you'll become increasingly used to having a fuller bladder. Okay, so there's that thing you can do. Also, what you'll find is if you wake up for a wee in the night and don't go for half an hour, so say if you wake up at 1 a.m. and need to go to the toilet, if you just lie there and don't go for half an hour, you'll find that the next night you wake up a bit later to go, and you can push it back. So you can end up then sleeping right through the night. So what I would do is note the times you're getting up, and just try and put it off. And obviously a simple point, but don't drink loads before bedtime. If you're properly hydrated by like 4 or 5 o'clock, you shouldn't really need loads of water during the night anyway. Most people can go quite a few hours without water with no ill effects at all. So I would say to try that as well. The next one's an interesting one because it says addressing anger and window of tolerance, personal character flaws we didn't see while drinking. And then someone's commented to say anger isn't a character flaw. And I agree with that completely. I think any character, any part of human character, you can see it either as a flaw or something that's beneficial. So you might think to yourself that anger isn't beneficial, but actually being kind of short-tempered isn't always a bad thing. I mean, certain careers, kind of like ones I've ended up with as a lawyer, you need to be kind of direct and to the point and to cut through the rubbish and to not allow people to talk nonsense. So actually kind of being short-tempered, and that can be, quite good. And things like, people often associate addiction with being risk taking. But it's not necessarily a bad thing to be a risk taker. Risk takers are generally people who are achievers as well, because you have to take risks to achieve. So any character flaw you have, it's like a double-edged sword. It has its good points and it has its bad points, even things that you might think are all bad, like anger. But being kind of intolerant of nonsense, things you perceive of nonsense, is not always a bad thing. And certainly if you look at, the heads of big multinational companies, they're that kind of person. They're the big achievers. If you've genuinely got something that you're not happy about in your character, then again, it's probably out of my remit to be talking about it. You might want to see a counsellor or something, but I would say anger and stuff isn't particularly problematic. And also don't forget, anger is the withdrawal that alcohol that I've just talked about does make us prone to anger, as does the lack of sleep that alcohol gives. So drinkers tend to be quite angry and prone to anger and bad temper. If you're in the early days of sobriety, you can expect that, and you can expect it to improve quite dramatically. I always thought I was a really, really short-tempered and easily irritated person, and I suppose I still am, but not half as badly as I was when I was drinking. So the next one's another interesting one. Hi, William. In your book, you talk about how our subconscious associates drinking with a relaxing effect because that's the immediate reaction we get from the drink. But then it doesn't associate the shame and lethargic feeling to that drink because it's delayed. I found that when I was waking up with a hangover, I reminded myself over and over again that this was caused by the alcohol, and now I'm suddenly repulsed by the thought of alcohol. Excellent. Is there such a thing as training your subconscious to associate the drink to the morning after? By the way, thanks, because this has worked for me, and I only thought to do it when I woke up at 3 and 6 a.m. after a bad binge, thanks to the knowledge in your book. Well, that's fantastic news. What I would say is, and it's a purely technical point almost, because you've got where you need to be, and it's fantastic. The subconscious is always like, it's an immediate trigger to something. So yes, you can retrain it. Absolutely, you can. But don't forget as well. So with the subconscious, it acts on repeated cause and effect. So if you're constantly doing something, your brain will trigger that action when it requires the effect. And the obvious example that I always give is when you're driving, and then if you're a passenger in a car, and someone who's driving is driving too fast or too close to the vehicle in front, you find your right leg, your braking leg, tensing all the time, even though there's no brake in the passenger well of the vehicle. But it does change quite quickly. So if you were to be a passenger for a year, then you probably find your legs stop tensing after a while. I've never been the passenger for that long, I don't know, but it does learn over time. So what I think you've done there is your subconscious has just eventually learned that alcohol is no longer on the menu, so it stopped triggering a thought for it, and you've done that by a conscious association, by stopping it every time it happened, and countering it. So it's fantastic. That's great news. That's exactly what you should be aiming for, and it's worked. So well done. The next one, interesting thing happened to me on the weekend. Over 100 days alcohol free. Well done. I picked up a bug from somewhere. I was terribly sick with migraine and gastro. It felt horrific. It felt like a horrific hangover. It was a good reminder of what they can feel like, and it felt like such a strong association to the drink. I find that as well. But I kind of find that even when you're really ill, it's better than being hungover. And I think the reason is, when you're not well, you kind of crawl into bed and rest. Whereas when you're hungover, you've got that kind of anxiety. And that to me is the real horror of the hangover, is that you're kind of exhausted and tired, but unable to sleep because of that oversensitization. It's horrible. But at least when you're genuinely ill, one, you don't feel like you have to battle through it. That's, I think, what we all do when we're hungover and we've kind of self-inflicted it. We kind of feel like we shouldn't be ringing into work, and we shouldn't be just not helping out around the house because we brought it on ourselves. But when you're genuinely ill, you don't have that kind of feeling that you feel guilty for wanting to just lie in bed all day. But yeah, I completely agree. It is, absolutely. It seems so difficult for me to make the step again of not buying and consuming alcohol. I am reading, watching videos, and doing a course in alcohol and drug abuse online. So again, it's too vague a comment for me to say anything meaningful on it. But what you do need to do is to drill in yourself because people don't buy and consume alcohol subconsciously. You don't just sleepwalk into a shop and buy it. You buy it because you want it for some reason, and you need to analyze those thoughts about why you want it. Usually it helps me relax. I can't cope with life without it. Life's more fun with it. Whatever it is, you need to start analyzing that and start getting to grips with it. And the information is all there to completely debuse that belief. What I would say, and I've said many times, is books like Alcohol Explained and all the other quit lit out there, it's possible to read it and understand it and agree with it on an academic level, but then fail to draw it into your own drinking and your own remit of experience and to actually apply it to your own drinking. And I think a lot of people do that, because I do get messages from people saying, I've read your book, I completely agree with it, but I still want to drink. It's not enough to just read it and agree with it and understand it. You've got to apply it to your own drinking. So I give a chapter on socializing, and I explain why alcohol doesn't help socializing, why it doesn't, the good feeling you get when you're out socializing isn't an alcohol high at all, and that alcohol actually just spoils that feeling. But unless you really apply it to your own drinking, it's just an academic point, and you will still want to go on drinking. After quitting, I never did the experiment of having the last drink in a quiet room. And so I've never experienced that slightly dull, dizzy feeling you write about. I only still associate drinking with having fun, laughing with friends, and then being horribly hungover. For me now, the desire to be healthy and not hungover is now stronger than the fantasy of fun times drinking with friends. But I really wish I could reprogram my brain to not think drinking is fun. So there's a few points to say here. You don't need to do that specific experiment anyway, because I think most people, when they understand it on an academic level, can then apply it to their own drinking, kind of understand. I know lots of people that haven't done this, but believe it. And that's what it comes down to. If you think about sitting in a quiet room and having a drink with no friends, no music, no nothing, it's a very different experience, and you should be able to pull that out through your imagination without having to actually do it. But what I would say anyway is, don't get too bogged down in things, because the ideal is to stop drinking and to never want alcohol again. Okay, that's the ideal. But if you do crave it on occasions, but you get to grips with those cravings, that's still better than drinking anyway. So if you are in a situation and you say you associate drinking with have laughing and having fun and being horribly hungover, and that desire to be healthy is stronger than the fantasy of fun times, then that's probably a fairly good result. But what you can do, because don't forget there's two elements to this. There's one, that alcohol doesn't do anything for you. Okay, and I would not suggest you do that experiment, because if you've quit drinking, don't go back to it. But you can try the other side of it, which is go out with your friends and enjoy yourself. So go out and have fun, relax. And I've spoken about it before. When you're relaxed and socializing, your brain releases endorphins. Okay, and that's the high we associate with drinking. It's not an alcohol buzz. If you go out with friends and relax and enjoy yourself, you will feel good and you will enjoy it. So you will be able to approach that from the other way without having to sit in a room and drink. You can try it from the other way and go out with your friends, relax and enjoy yourself, and think, do you know what? I actually enjoyed that anyway. And like everything else, be it Christmas, holidays, whatever, it's more enjoyable not drinking, but it's different. There's a different enjoyment there. So don't think you're going to go out and enjoy it in exactly the same way. It's a different enjoyment. You're actually enjoying the situation rather than the alcohol. So it is different, but it's more enjoyable. So I hope that's useful. Next one is, I'm confused as to how the mornings my mind feels so hijacked, as if I'm not the person driving my brain. I feel like I come back online around 2 p.m. Is it the limbic system being jangled, or the executive function toasted, or some other mechanism that makes you feel so viscerally disconnected? So when you wake up, you will have had a very bad night's sleep because of the alcohol affecting you and destroying your natural sleeping pattern, and you'll have the anxiety from the previous night's drinking. Okay, so that's the main element of the hangover. and then you say you come back online around 2. Okay, so that's the time maybe that the anxiety starts to drift away, and that maybe because you've been moving around a bit, you're getting grips with the fact you haven't slept or something. I don't know, but that is, I'm not sure what I'm being asked there really. But yeah, you will feel rubbish, and you'll feel increasingly better as the day goes on. If you're feeling like what you describe about coming online, that's probably a sleep issue. So I've spoken about this many times, but obviously with sleep isn't just about going unconscious for a few hours. You go through sleep cycles, and one of the main differentiating factors with sleep cycles is how deeply unconscious you are. There's deep sleep where you're deeply unconscious, and then there's at the other end of the scale REM sleep where your brain lights up almost as if you're fully awake. But you need to go through all of these different sleep cycles because alcohol is a sedative. In the first part of the sleep, first part of the night, you're too sedated to go into the REM sleep. And in the second part of the night, usually people wake up and can't get back to sleep at all because that's where their brain, the alcohol wears off and their brain's really oversensitized, so they can't sleep at all. So it might just be that you're absolutely exhausted and you need a few hours moving around to get your body moving. And I think if you stop drinking for a few days, you probably feel completely different. Hi, William. I think I remember you saying you suffered from restless leg syndrome. I realised I had it after I stopped drinking. I had it after I stopped drinking last year, and after about 4 months, it completely disappeared. Like an idiot, I started drinking again, and since stopping again on the 1st of July, I noticed it's back. I was wondering if you believe alcohol can cause this, and if you may have any advice to relieve the symptoms. I don't really. I did used to have it, and since stopping drinking, I don't have it. But other than that, I can't tell you anything more about it, I'm afraid. So maybe, yeah, that might be one for me to look into at some point. Sorry. What are the best tips for getting away from perpetual day ones? My cognitive dissonance is at such polar opposites. I can't keep at this rate forever. Never a gains in the morning, absolutely disgusted with myself. And then 5 p.m. comes around and I'm on the wine, so sick and tired. So I've done a blog post on this. Have a look in the website, which has been completely revamped, by the way. So if you do look at the website and have any comments, let me know, because I've just had it redone. But there is, I think it's, I forget what it's called now. I'll have to post it. It was, I think it's called Why It's Not So Effective the Second Time. Okay. And what I suggest there is, because don't forget what ambition and fading effect bias does. It basically means the further you get away from something, the more you look at it fondly and think it was better than it was. They're two different mechanisms, but they do the same thing. With ambition, ambition is about wanting what you don't have and being critical of what you do have. And when it comes to drug addiction, it works against us. It's a driving force which causes human beings to sort of progress through life and keep reaching for something better because we're critical of what we do have and we idolize what we don't have. But it completely rebounds on us when it's with drug addiction, because when you quit, you start fantasizing about how good it was when it wasn't that good. And then you go back to it and you go back to the reality. So you're right back where you started. So what you're doing when you're doing day ones all the time, you're waking up and saying, right, I'm not going to drink. And then you're spending all day probably thinking about what it would be like to drink. And then by the time 5 o'clock comes round, you're back on it again. What can work quite well is to stop doing the day one all the time, and set yourself a date. So like a week's time, and you'll say, right, on this day, I'm stopping. No matter what happens, I'm stopping, and I'm stopping for 5 days, say. Okay, so that's all you're going to do. You're going to drink for a week, and then you're going to stop for 5 days. Not that you're going to start again after the 5 days, and not that you're only going to do 5 days, but what you're going to do is just go 5 days and then reevaluate your decision about whether you want to carry on or go back to drinking. Okay, that's all you're going to do. But the caveat here is, for the week you're drinking, every time you're awake, whatever you're doing, you need to be comparing what you would be doing and how you would be feeling if you weren't drinking. Okay, so most people, when they're drinking, most people's days start at 3 or 4 in the morning, where you wake up exhausted but unable to go back to sleep because you've got that overstimulation and that anxiety. So you lie there worried and exhausted and unable to sleep. So when you do that, think to yourself, what would you be doing if you hadn't drunk for a month? So you'd be fast asleep, you'd be getting all the restful sleep you need. And then when you drag yourself out of bed at 6 or 7 in the morning, whatever it is, again, think about how you'd feel if you hadn't been drinking. Okay, you'd be feeling pretty buoyant, pretty ready to face the day and pretty energetic. And as you drag yourself through the day, be constantly thinking about how much better you'd feel if you'd never drunk. Okay. But the key point comes at 5 p.m. when you open your bottle of wine. Really concentrate on what it does to you. And this is a good time to, when you have your wine, don't have the TV on, don't have music on, don't have company. Just sit alone somewhere and drink whatever you normally drink on your own and really concentrate on it. And this is where journaling helps, to write down what you do, because what you will find is that first glass of wine will feel absolutely wonderful. And the reason it feels wonderful is because it's anesthetizing all the anxiety from the previous drinks and all the tiredness and exhaustion that you've been suffering from because you haven't slept for however many years you've been drinking for, not slept properly anyway. And that's the great benefit you get from your 5 o'clock glass of wine. So that great feeling you get from that is how we who have quit drinking for long periods feel all the time. And yes, of course, you have bad days, but the vast majority of them are actually very good days. And even the bad days, you're better able to cope with them. So you do that for a week. And then what you will usually find is by the time you get to your stopping day, you'll actually be, instead of thinking it's a pain in the backside and not really wanting to go ahead with it, you should be a bit more enthusiastic for it. And don't forget, you're only going for 5 days anyway. So you're just doing those 5 days. But what you will find is after those 5 days, your brain chemistry is starting to get back to normal. So your resilience is building up, and then you'll probably find it much easier. The first 5 days will be much harder than the next 5. So that's when you revisit your decision and decide whether to carry on for a bit. So I hope that is useful. As I say, that's the blog post on the website entitled Why It's Not So Effective the Second Time Round. And I think on the new website, I'll have a look now, actually. I think you need to go to, so just bear with me a second and I'll have a quick look. So if you go to the menu, there is articles and there's categories, and I think it's probably under, don't know, having said all that, alcohol and I don't know. It's on. I'll post it to the group anyway, or if anyone. Oh no, here's here. So if you go to alcoholic and sleep as a category, it's the second post down, so fairly easy to find. Lucky. So the next one, I'm on day 472 of abstinence, so that's fantastic. That's brilliant. Well done. That's over a year, obviously. And amazingly, I found ditching alcohol okay. I reframed alcohol as a poison fairly early on, and since then I've been able to back down one night off won't hurt type thoughts fairly easily. Good. I also now see how much alcohol is accepted and normalised by people's society, which has further strengthened my resolve not to drink. However, despite having this new perspective on the evils of alcohol, on occasion I still really want to drink. For example, I really wanted a glass of wine when I was in a cosy restaurant on my birthday. I also don't call myself a non-drinker yet, and if I'm honest with myself, I actually sit on the fence as to whether my abstinence will be for life. I know drinking, trying to moderate, doesn't work for me, and I do see alcohol as the poison it truly is, yet I don't feel I'm fully committed to abstinence because of the above, and I'm wondering if that's even an issue if I don't feel any danger of drinking anytime soon. My question is it okay to bumble along with abstinence like this, or should I try to firm up my commitment to being alcohol-free for life? And if yes, any tips on how to get there? So firstly, I would say you're doing excellently, and that's something to be very proud of. And if you're happy with that, then I would go with it, to be honest. I think one of the slight issues with it is there is a slightly different dynamic to telling yourself you're never going to drink again and accepting it, to just kind of increasing an alcohol-free period over and over. And the main difference in the dynamic is that it's almost like a sort of carrot and stick thing. You're almost just saying, oh, I'll go a little bit longer, I'll go a little bit longer, which kind of suggests, as you've said yourself, and I think you've identified it, you're not quite happy with going alcohol free forever, which again suggests and goes back to what you've already said, that you do see it as beneficial in certain circumstances. So it's fine where you are, and if it stays that way, you'll be absolutely fine. But the problem is, because of the effects of fading effect bias and ambition, which I've spoken about very briefly, and because with alcohol we're constantly bombarded with images of people drinking and enjoying themselves, what you often find is it actually becomes, not that it becomes harder to stop over time, but your sobriety almost wears away over time if you're not careful. And it sounds like you've maybe got an issue there anyway, because a part of you still sees it as beneficial and pleasant. So you've battened down, you said you've been able to batten down the one night off won't hurt thoughts fairly easily. So what I would do is just start battening down the other thoughts as well. So where you say I wanted a glass of wine when I was in a cozy restaurant on your birthday, again, go through that in a bit more detail and ask yourself what that glass of wine would have actually added to the evening. Remember what we're talking about here. It's just a drug that makes you feel slightly dulled before then giving you a corresponding feeling of anxiety. That's all it is. And it's just so happens that as opposed to drugs that we smoke or inject, this particular one we tend to drink, and that's all there is to it. If you're somewhere cozy and enjoyable on your birthday, that's enjoyable. Taking something that's going to make you feel slightly dulled before making you feel slightly anxious is not going to add to that in any way, shape or form. So I would try and get to grips with those. You're absolutely fine where you are. The only thing I would say is your sobriety there's a tendency for it to wear away over time, as I say, due to fading effect bias and ambition. So just be slightly careful there. The last question is, if it's not too late to ask a question for this evening, no. Is there a link between being addicted to alcohol and addiction to other things? I asked because when I used to smoke, I felt the same way as I do now about wine. I would have one and need to smoke the whole packet. It continues to be the same with sugar. I have chocolate and need to eat it all and whatever is left in the house. When I drink wine, I have to finish the bottle and then anything else in the house. Has my brain learnt this from all these substances, or is there some crossover? So all of these substances are addictive. And when I'm talking about addiction, I'm talking about something that as it leaves your body, it creates a withdrawal, which is essentially a desire for the next dose. So with alcohol, it's a sedative, it's a depressant. So your brain reacts to that and becomes overly sensitive so it can work under the depressant or sedating effects of the alcohol. So when the alcohol wears off, you're left feeling overly anxious. It's not a particularly pleasant feeling. So what you need to do then, you then need another dose of it to take away that anxious, unpleasant feeling. And that's what it does. It's the same with nicotine, in that when the nicotine leaves your system, you start to feel, you have the withdrawal from it, you still start to feel slightly out of sorts and slightly unpleasant. So you need another dose of it. And that's what it is. And sugar's the same, because when sugar goes into your body produces insulin to remove it. Now, because with refined sugar, it's different and goes into your system far quicker than naturally occurring sugar, you then have a sugar crash afterwards as the insulin pulls out all the sugar. So all of the things you've mentioned are addictive in that when you take one dose, it creates the desire for the next dose. So that's all it is. It really is that simple. It's not necessarily your brain learning anything other than that when the drug wears off, you need another dose to remedy that unpleasant feeling. I think that's pretty much everything. I'm just going to see if I can get to any comments on the Facebook page. I've got this thing I had last time where I can only see 4 comments, which is a bit irritating. So I might have to give those a miss. Yeah. Oh, here we go. Right. So sounds better. Good. So yeah, lots of lovely comments for which thank you. Someone said, aside from your books, which other books do you recommend? Recently bought Alan Carr's Easy Way to Stop Drinking. What are your thoughts? Alan Carr for me paved the way, absolutely. And if you want to dig a bit more into that, funnily enough, his Only Way to Stop Smoking Permanently is a good read, because his Alan Carr's Easy Way to Stop Smoking is almost just a short pamphlet it's a really short book on stopping smoking, but his Only Way to Stop Smoking Permanently is a much deeper dive into his thoughts on the whole thing. It's quite wordy, it's quite a big book, but that's worth reading. Other books, probably you would have read them anyway. This Naked Mind is one that gets recommended an awful lot. Simon Chappell's books as well, people have been recommending as very good. Claire Pooley's book I really enjoyed. So there's a huge amounts of them out there. What do you advise for waking up early in the morning with anxiety? Well, usually that's due, as I say, that's the drinking. So what you don't say is whether you're doing that having stopped drinking. If you're not drinking and haven't drunk for a few weeks and you're waking up early morning with anxiety, you may have an underlying anxiety issue. In which case you need to speak to a doctor or something. But if it's early days, then it's the alcohol and it will wear off very, very quickly. My friend is very concerned about her partner's drinking. She doesn't drink and he becomes very defensive when discussing how much he drinks. He suffers from depression and takes medication for this. I mentioned how great I was feeling at being 37 days alcohol free. Reading your books has helped me enormously, as well as the alcohol experiment, joining these Facebook groups. Do you have any other advice to helping him see the joys of being alcohol free? So what I usually recommend people to do is to give people, obviously would be my book, Alcohol Explained to someone, but don't say to them it's to stop drinking, because lots of people don't want to stop drinking. That's why they have a problem with it. And just say to them, just read it. It's information. Continue to drink if you want to, but at least have the information at your fingertips, because that hopefully will sort of drip in the possibility of stopping. I'm just having a look. I think that's pretty much it. Oh, last one then. Look, we've got just about time. Would you advise to count every alcohol-free day or just stop without counting days, months, years? This is a really personal choice, this. Some people will swear blind that you should just quit and have done with it. The benefit of doing that is it's kind of more definite, because I think when you're counting, there's a tendency to almost, you're kind of just limping on day by day, as opposed to, right, that's it, I'm done, finished. And I can kind of see that. But then also I think a lot of people are very understandably very proud of their quitting, and they celebrate their days. So I think you do need to do whatever's best for you. But what I would try not to do is almost limp from one day to the next. You should be embracing sobriety. It shouldn't be a slog. And if it's a slog, you need to work at it. You need to start changing your mindset. You need to be doing some work around it. So count days if they are a celebration of something wonderful you're achieving. But if you're reaching the next day is the only thing that's keeping you going, you've probably got a bit of work to do to make it easier on yourself. I hope that was useful for everyone. So I'm not here next week, but I will probably go back to doing the lives again on, I can't remember what day it is. It must be, as I say, the 12th or something. So I'll post in Thursday week and do another one, hopefully on the Friday at about 8 o'clock. So have a lovely weekend, everyone. Enjoy next week, and I shall see you in a fortnight. Cheers. Bye.